You walk around this building, and everyone is so supportive and so excited about what is happening with the Fever. And you look down.
The whole basketball community breathed a collective sigh of relief when the Indiana Fever formally announced they were splitting from Christie sides because everyone could sense Caitlin Clark's mounting dissatisfaction every game. Fans applauded the announcement, believing that the last step in transforming this faltering team into an invincible dynasty was to fire a coach who obviously couldn't manage a generational talent. However, the front office is frantically trying to hide the fact that their supposedly ideal new hire is bringing a huge, potentially disastrous issue right to Caitlin's door, creating a situation that executives fear could bring down the entire company from the inside out. As a result, the celebratory atmosphere may be completely premature. In order to secure Stephanie White as the new head coach and preserve their own jobs, Fever management orchestrated a massive, franchise-altering regime change behind the scenes. Kelly Krauskopf returned to oversee basketball operations, while Hall of Fame executive Lynn Dunn quietly retreated into the background. Given that White is a well-liked former Fever figure, an iconic Indiana basketball player who is familiar with the area, and a seasoned leader who understands exactly what it takes to win a championship in this league, it seems like a perfect storybook ending on paper. However, behind closed doors, executives and league insiders are reportedly worried about a basic, indisputable personality and play style conflict between the franchise player and the new head coach, which could make the forthcoming season the most widely reported catastrophe in sports history. The harsh reality is that firing Christie sides was the easiest decision the front office has ever had to make. However, without the spirit, inventiveness, and marketability of their billion-dollar franchise player, resolving the deep-seated underlying problems in Indiana may be practically impossible. And you need to take a hard look at what transpired the last time Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark shared a basketball court in order to comprehend why their new alliance is a ticking time bomb ready to explode. As the brilliant head coach of the Connecticut Sunday, Stephanie White was actively involved in planning the complete ruin of the Fever's postseason aspirations just weeks before she was given the keys to the Fever Kingdom and hailed as Indiana basketball's ultimate savior. Not only did she easily defeat the Fever in the opening round of the playoffs, but she also humiliated them by creating a brutal, suffocating defensive masterclass that revealed and took advantage of every weakness in Caitlin Clark's play on national television. White gave her players, especially defensive specialist DiJonai Carrington, explicit instructions to physically exhaust Caitlin, deny her the ball at all costs, and put her in extremely uncomfortable, hotly contested situations. This resulted in startling turnover numbers and obvious on-court meltdowns. The rookie phenomenon was mentally and physically broken by White's tough, muscular, and unrepentant style of defensive basketball, which at times rendered the league's most potent offensive weapon absolutely defenseless. Caitlin was battered, wounded, and obviously upset with the lack of protection from the officials and her own coaching staff during those very contentious times of physical contact, heated confrontations, and unrelenting pressure throughout that tough playoff series. In a bizarre and somewhat inconceivable turn of events, Caitlin Clark's coach, who penned the definitive, indisputable blueprint for shutting her down totally, is now tasked with realizing her full potential and ensuring her happiness. This hiring is incredibly ironic and reveals a deep philosophical gap that the front office is aware will produce intense conflict as soon as training camp begins. Intense defensive pressure, tough half-court execution, and complete, unquestionable discipline on every possession, regardless of who is holding the basketball, are the cornerstones of Stephanie White's overall coaching persona, which has been developed during years of demanding WNBA experience. She insists that her players destroy their opponents, allowing no space for careless errors, sluggish transition defense, or self-centered play that compromises the team's defensive integrity in favor of a spectacular highlight. However, anyone who has watched Caitlin Clark play basketball since her legendary days at the University of Iowa understands that her unquestionable superpower is the complete opposite of strict discipline. She thrives in pure, unadulterated chaos, pushing the pace to its absolute limit, taking wild, unprecedented risks, and making 30-foot bombs with 20 seconds remaining on the shot clock. Millions of new followers were enthralled with her because of her unparalleled independence and wild offensive skill. It broke every attendance and viewership record the WNBA has ever set in its history. She relies only on instinct, emotion, and momentum, which frequently produces breathtaking highlight reel plays that dominate social media and result in startling turnover figures. Unquestionable defensive errors and dubious shot selection would make a traditional coach lose their mind. Caitlin was given an extremely long leash under Christie side's previous administration because the former coach was obviously afraid to limit her star player, knowing full well that upsetting the delicate balance of a fan base that was only watching to see number 22 shoot the lights out could cost her job. In order to prevent a public altercation, teams would frequently just clap Caitlin's hands nervously, pace the sidelines, and turn a blind eye when she missed a critical defensive assignment, failed to sprint back in transition, or spent important seconds moaning to the refs instead of getting back on defense. However, Stephanie White does not turn a blind eye to anyone, and her history demonstrates that she is unafraid of big shoe deals, celebrity egos, or the intense national media glare. White constantly demonstrated during her incredibly prosperous time in Connecticut that she doesn't give a damn about your viral ads or your millions of social media followers or the quantity of jersey replicas you sell in the team store. Regardless of your name, you will be stuck on the bench if you don't execute her rigorous defensive scheme flawlessly. The Fever general manager and front office executives wake up in a cold sweat, terrified of what will happen for the first time. This is the precise terrible scenario. In order to publicly chastise the league for missing a defensive rotation, White invariably calls a timeout. The internet will completely blow up in real time if White chooses to bench Caitlin Clark in order to make a point about team accountability and defensive effort. The front office will be caught in the middle of an unwinnable civil war between their billion-dollar asset and their hand-picked, unyielding disciplinarian. Whispers from connected insiders throughout the league indicate that rival executives actively warned the Indiana ownership group about this precise, inevitable power struggle long before the ink on Stephanie White's enormous new contract was even dry. So this isn't just idle conjecture or manufactured internet drama either. Simply put, no professional coach has ever put Caitlin to the test. Having a record of championships, a tough exterior, and a merciless defensive style similar to White's. Additionally, every major sports network in the nation will undoubtedly closely monitor this moment of transition, which is sure to be extremely volatile and emotionally charged. However, the animosity between the superstar point guard and the head coach doesn't end there. The entire roster dynamics and locker room chemistry that the front office has spent years painstakingly building throughout the draft and free agency are aggressively infected by it. A detailed examination of the surrounding cast is necessary, beginning with Aaliyah Boston, a magnificent generational post talent who frequently appeared lost and irritated in the hectic, fast-paced, run-and-gun offense that Caitlin unavoidably forced the team to play during the first half of the previous season. The kind of slow, bruising, half-court offensive system that Stephanie White loves to run and used flawlessly with Alyssa Thomas in Connecticut is what Boston, a traditional, methodical, highly skilled big woman, desperately needs structured, deliberate touches in the paint to be effective. Caitlin's astounding stats and viral transition highlights will suffer greatly if White chooses to purposefully slow down the game in order to feed Aaliyah Boston in the post, create a physical inside presence, and incorporate a more balanced, conventional assault. Arguably the most fierce competitor in the sport's history, Caitlin is not the kind of player who will passively stand in the corner while the offense runs through the post or quietly accept a diminished offensive role, creating an instant tactical nightmare for the coaching staff. The impending, extremely stressful free agency of Kelsey Mitchell, who was perhaps Indiana's most dependable, consistent offensive weapon in the last stretch of the season and into the playoffs, would only make things more difficult. Mitchell demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that she can run the floor with Caitlin and flourish in a fast-paced setting, but she also essentially needs the ball in her hands to aggressively create her own shot. This adds another enormous ego, scoring demand, and ball-dominant presence to an already packed locker room. These conflicting egos and overlapping skill sets were utterly unmanaged by the previous coaching staff under Christie sides, which resulted in unmistakable instances of obvious frustration, awful body language on the court, and highly plausible, persistent rumors of a deeply divided locker room where veteran players were secretly unhappy with the intense, oppressive media circus surrounding the rookie. Stephanie White is stepping confidently into this exact powder keg of unresolved resentment and tactical dysfunction. Her strict, no-nonsense commanding style will either force these women to bond through discipline and adversity or completely shatter whatever shaky, improvised chemistry they managed to establish by the end of last year's playoff push. NaLyssa Smith, a very gifted striker whose relationship with the team quickly deteriorated last season, is one of the most intriguing and potentially combustible subplots of this entire transformation, resulting in mysterious, removed social media posts, less playing time, and obvious disengagement from the team. The fact that NaLyssa Smith's partner is DiJonai Carrington, the same Connecticut Sun player Stephanie White just extensively relied on to physically torment, harass, and shut down Caitlin Clark during the playoffs, adds an amazing element of drama to this particular situation. This creates a complex, awkward, and extremely sensitive interpersonal dynamic that calls for the delicate touch of a master psychologist, not just a basketball coach. White is now taking over a locker room with a deeply disgruntled player whose significant other was just used as a weapon against the franchise superstar. White runs the risk of upsetting Caitlin Clark if she dismisses Melissa Smith right away in an effort to save Smith's career in Indiana.